I always feel like that 30 seconds is the longest 30 seconds ever. And then when it starts ending, I'm like, oh, whoa, whoa, okay. Oh, let me get ready.
I love
But
the look though. I love the hair.
thank you. I had to cut it in and redo it again. I was like, oh, I colored it too much. Now it's time to start again.
Mm.
And it's been thicker than ever. Like, I'm so surprised by it. I'm like, is this me? Is this what you look like?
Mm-hmm.
Unfiltered?
It's
No.
the weather. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this cold weather definitely will make your curls do a cool thing. And then we have our first viewer. Hey, Pachancia.
Hey, Potencia.
So far, we have 2 viewers. We're going to wait a few minutes before we start. But,
Okay.
yeah. This orange is so nice on you. Or is that a peach?
Thank you. I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe coral. Maybe it was a coral. Yeah.
probably. Probably coral.
It's got hit by the sun a few times, but you know.
Mm. That'll happen. In this field, it's safer to go with colors like gray because when you're working in the sun and in the water, if the gray fades, it always still just looks like gray. Whereas black starts to look dingy, navy blue
Mm.
especially, you start to get this rust color going with navy blue, like
Yeah.
it's the worst.
I
And
like this one because I'll be like, I don't deep in the mangrove bush, and if someone's trying to find me, then he's like, okay, where's the red? Where's the orange?
definitely. There's my aunt. Hi, Aunt Denise.
Hi, Auntie.
Awesome. All right, so we got about 7 viewers. We can probably start. I know the Prime Minister, of course, has an address, which I think every other episode he tends to just
Wonderful.
try to schedule his addresses for right after my episode, which I guess is good for me if he promoted it, but nonetheless. Welcome everyone to episode 5 of season 2 of Siren Sundays. Today, my lovely guest is Agnessa, who will be talking to us about mangroves and the coastal environment. So, Agnessa, tell the people who you are, what you do, and your background in education and experience.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lashanti, for having me. So, I am a senior environmental scientist by title with BRON Limited. By trade, I'm a marine ecologist in favor of the nearshore and coastal environment as much as possible. I've worked with mangroves since my senior year in college. I started to think about it in University of Hawaii, actually, where mangroves are invasive, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was my senior project was looking at the impact of red mangroves in Waiapai tide pools, which was ironically a protected area, right? And my research basically just found, yes, it was impacting the water quality. There was a lot of tannins from the mangroves into the tide pools, and that potentially could impact the wildlife. And then I moved, when I graduated university, I started working at Atlantis, and they had already established some red mangrove nursery setup. And I just continued it. It really blossomed when I took the lead on it, and then I helped with, organizing the first donation, and that really started their program of growing red mangroves to donate to conservation projects. And then it just continued throughout my career over the last 10, 11 years working with mangroves.
Nice. So, what made you start it? Was it because of your work in Hawaii that made you just get into mangroves, or have you always just kind of had an interest in mangroves specifically?
I don't know what started it. I can't say. I know I've always had an affinity for the water, an affinity for the beach, right? And I
Hmm.
just knew there were these funny looking plants, right? Like, it's a plant. Why is it growing in the ocean? It's directly in the water. This is not possible. What is this thing? Why does it look like this?
Hmm.
Um, so I always was aware of mangroves. Um, when I like I said, when I started my senior year in University of Hawaii, that's actually when I found about the Exumakee's Land and Sea Park. That is what they were teaching us. That was the first ever park. That's how I park.
Wow.
And then we learned about what was in that park, which was mangroves. So that started my love affair, if you will. And and it started with red mangroves. And then I explored the other species, the red, the black and white. I was like, okay, all right, this is a thing. It's the ecosystem as well as an individual plant. So it was just interesting. It's all encompassing. It's one thing, but it does so much, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just really kind of it happened. I didn't really plan to always work in mangroves. It just it's always there.
That's usually the best thing to do is just what is the thing that's just always there? Just kind of go with the flow. Like that's clearly that's what you were meant to be doing,
Yeah, I think so. I like it. So far, so good.
So can you tell our audience briefly, like, we already talked mangroves are plants that grow in the ocean, but what are mangroves, right? And you can name the 4 species because I think a lot of people just see that one type. And why are they so important for the coastal ecosystem?
Okay, so mangroves are basically plants that can live in salty environments, just in a nutshell, right? So you have in the Bahamas, we have true mangroves, which are like the red, black, white mangrove. I will butcher the scientific names. Rhizophora mango is the red. Avicennia germinans, I think it's the black, and Laguncularia rismos is the white. Yeah.
You know better than me.
You can look that up. We can Google that, definitely. Right. And then you have the buttonwood, which some people classify as a mangrove, but I like to consider them an affiliate of the mangrove because they can grow exclusive of the mangrove habitat, right? They don't only grow with mangroves.
Okay.
So I say they can survive some salt, but they don't necessarily, they can move inland. And, I'm sure, have you seen, they're kind of ornamental. Some people use them for hedges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the same actual species that grows in and among. Yeah, there's just
staying in the mangrove one. They just
yeah. So basically, that's what a mangrove is. They survive the salt in different ways. Some excrete the salt on the leaves. Some have membranes on the roots that block the salt from coming in. But basically, yeah, that's how they're able to survive in that harsh environment. And the reason they're so important is because they provide habitat for a lot of different species, marine species and terrestrial species. So there's a lot of bird nests, a lot of foraging that happens from the land side, crabs, right? And then you have a lot of fish habitat, lobster, so the snappers and all of the fish all the delicacies we like to eat, they're often found in the mangroves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the really important benefits of mangroves is the benefit to increased biodiversity.
Okay.
Another benefit is they actually prevent or help prevent erosion along coastlines. Okay? So they're right at that interface of land and sea. The ocean is salty, it's very harsh, and our country is made up of limestone. So the rock is pretty soft. So once you have that ocean beating against that limestone, it erodes, it washes away. And if you have that mangrove in the middle there, kind of slows down that rate of erosion.
And so you had said you had looked at mangroves, which are actually invasive in Hawaii, and you've obviously now studied mangroves in the Bahamas. Is there anything that makes the mangroves in the Bahamas unique?
Well, yes. So we have our sandbank. How do I explain it? We have a lot of flats. Flats is like the colloquial term for it. So we have sandbanks. Sorry, sometimes. So we have a lot of sandbanks that are really shallow, and we have a lot of red mangroves that grow on those sandbanks, and they are often referred to as dwarf red mangroves. So we have a lot of dwarf red mangroves compared to a lot of other countries that also have red mangroves, exact same species of red mangroves. Mm-hmm. And our population is pretty widespread from the north to the south, from the east to the west. They're just everywhere, right? Yes, they're under threat. Yes, they're going down, but by and large, we still have a pretty good population.
Right. So I remember you had actually done some work with like mangrove genetics. Do you want to talk about that at all, or is that confidential?
No, I can talk about it. I can talk about it a little bit.
Right.
So I worked with Bahamas National Trust. You collected a lot of samples for me. Thank you. So I collected samples from, or we, the team, right? All around the country, red mangroves. And the purpose of the research was really trying to figure out if we had a lot of different families of red mangroves or different populations within the Bahamas, or if it's one homogeneous area, right?
Right.
And what my research found is actually about 4 different families, right, of red mangroves. So yes, they're the same species, but if I were to draw an analogy, it's like when you do your family genetics, like I am close to my mommy and my daddy and my brothers, my aunts, my uncles, we're the same family unit, right? And you have your family unit, you have the jumps, you're genetically similar to those people, right? We are both humans. Yeah, we're both females, we're both humans, right? Same species, but we have separate family groups.
Right.
Okay, so to keep the analogy going, right? If you have reproduction within the same family unit, right? We know what happens. That decreases your fitness. That decreases the health of that offspring. And what we want in conservation, what we want in restoration are fit individuals, individuals that are likely to survive fluxes and changes in the environment, because climate change is real. Change is happening every day. So we have the most fit individual as possible in our conservation and restoration projects. We want the most fit individuals in our protected areas, right?
Right.
So when I say there's 4 different family groups of red mangroves, we want to make sure when we are helping the reproduction along through our restoration projects, we want to make sure we have mixing of different family groups.
And so has that been happening?
To a certain degree. So this is the first type of research of its kind here. So it has not been, that information has not been used because we just didn't know, right?
Right.
You know, some benefits of research, you just keep going, you keep learning, you keep progressing. We just didn't know. I've shared my work with Justin Lewis from Bonefish Tarpon and Trust, and with Bahamas National Trust, and with the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection. And I hope that it is used as best as possible, right?
Right.
I'm definitely trying to work with those groups as restoration continues.
Yeah. So does that mean, because with restoration efforts, does that mean it's better to intentionally mix these groups? Like if you know that you have samples from the north, I mean, I guess you're getting the crocodiles, the young mangroves, red mangroves, of course. Is it, you can like transplant them into different areas, or is it safer to keep them near? So it's kind of like not completely brand new, but am I making sense? I feel like I'm.
Yeah, no, you're making sense. So it's, what you should do is actually look at each restoration site as an independent restoration site and kind of design your project for that site, right?
Right.
So I don't want to give a blanket answer that says, yes, move it from here and put it over here. It really depends on the site. So what you want to do, the first thing you want to do after you're ready, ensure, you know, your hydrology is fine, you know, there's no pollution or whatever other problems there may be that may have caused the decline in the mangroves in that area. Once you're ready to solve all of those or address those issues, you want to really look at the genetics of the area and say, where would the mangroves have come from that would have been growing here? Where would they have come from? Where is their initial source? And if you could get mangroves from that source area and plant them to your restoration site, that would be the best option, because you are boosting the natural wave of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then Another option is if you cannot get. I am reading. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. So, other way, if you can't get that source, get as close to that source as possible, because what you want to do is mimic what's been happening in nature as close as possible.
Right. So what would be some of the negative impacts if I was to say, okay, this source area, we're not going to get it from this one. We're going to just randomly pick from somewhere else. Would that be detrimental to the environment, or it's just not the preferred method?
Isabel, please. Sorry. So, it can be detrimental. It doesn't necessarily have to be, right? So that's why I said you have to look at each area individually, case by case, to assess the situation, right? So mangroves are what you call foundation species, and there's a lot of work in rainforests and other terrestrial ecosystems on foundation species that shows the genetic diversity of the foundation species impacts the subsequent species that populate the area, right? Okay. So let's say, okay, this is a perfect example, right? So mangroves have been shown to decrease wave energy and wind energy in storms, right? Mm-hmm. And the way they do that is by their physical, their anatomy, right? So if there's a lot of roots, if there's a lot of roots, you can the wave energy is going to be broken up a lot more than a mangrove that only has one or two prop roots.
Right.
Okay. If there's a lot of branches, that mangrove can break up more wind energy, right? Mm-hmm. Than a mangrove that has one. But the basis of that anatomy is genetics, right? So if you know that this certain genotype tends to produce a mangrove that has a boatload of roots, and you want to restore an area that has high erosion by wave energy, you would want that particular genotype in this particular area.
Right.
So my research is not at that level yet. I would love for it to be. I would love for it to be. Yeah, that's one of the goals that I would like for my PhD, but it's not there right now. Right now, my research only shows there are 4 different groups. My thesis talks about the pros and cons of mixing them versus not.
Okay. Interesting. And so at this point, when you guys collect them, you're already collecting them at the propagule stage. You're not doing anything like tissue cultures and all of this growing in the lab stuff yet. That's in the...
Yeah, no, I know people that have done that. I have not. I've grown red, black, and white in soil, sand, and a mixture of soil and sand. I've not had any hydroponic, aquaponic experience.
Right. Yeah. And so how do you do that? You just pick them up and put them in soil? I know you had like little ones, right? The black and...
Yeah, so the black mangroves and the red mangroves, their seeds are actually called propagules, both of them. The red, pretty much, I think more people know. It looked like little pods, like little vanilla bean pods. Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see that.
Stick it in you just stick it in the dirt or the sediment. And there's a brown part to the bottom. It looks like a pencil. Mm-hmm. And you just stick that brown part in the soil with the green tip pointing up, and you just work their magic and just grow.
Oh, so we do
black mango.
Yeah, the black one, yeah.
What?
No, I said you do have a black one.
Oh, this is the... Yeah. I was trying to find... Can you see inside it? This way. Yeah.
That one looks so much more like plant-like to me. Is that weird to say, Like it definitely looks more like it's further inshore than how the red one is just very like straight up. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, they definitely have different growth mechanisms.
Yeah. Because that one, the black one's so quick to shoot out all those leaves, whereas the red, it just has those two, and it's like, I'm gonna get as tall as I can and get these leaves up and out, which I imagine it needs to do, if it's in the water, right? So
Yeah. So the black one looks like a lima bean, right?
mm-hmm.
And it's ready to grow, ready to germinate. It's just the two sides of the lima bean. Lima bean. Yeah, it just pops open and looks really weird. I can send you a photo and you can post it later. Right? But
Yeah, that'd be fun.
and then it just starts to grow really quickly because it doesn't have all of the energy built up in it, or as much energy as say the red mangrove propagule. So the red mangrove has all the good juicy stuff from the mummy tree just sitting in it for it to grow. So it takes longer for it to use up that energy before it decides, okay, I need leaves. I need to do something on my own now.
Yeah.
So difference. Yeah.
Interesting. And do you see that kind of progression with the seeds as you go further, in?
So another interesting thing what I learned. So typically when you learn about mangoes, right, they say the collective they, right? They say it's red along the coast, and then it's a black line of mangroves, and then there's a white line of mangroves, and then within that white you have buttonwood mixed in. That's how they teach it to you, right? To some degree, that exists in the Bahamas, to some degree. But I've had people come from my university, Manchester Metropolitan University, and different scientists over the years just working with me on different mangrove projects. And they're all amazed that that structure doesn't really apply here. So we have a lot of mixed going on. Yeah, we just mix right up, right? So there's black that's growing directly in 4 or 5 feet of water when it shouldn't be. It should be behind the reds.
Yeah.
And the dwarfs. You have some areas. I remember in Cat Island when I was collecting samples, there are areas where the talls and the dwarfs are all just mixed together. And then there's areas like Nago where you have a vast expanse of dwarfs. So it's pretty unique growth habitat.
And I always try to tell people the Bahamas is so unique when it comes to the species that we have, whether it be plant or animal, and people don't believe me. So that's even one of the things about this show. I was like, I hear so many cool things from people, and I'm like, does everyone know this? Like, are we aware of this? And maybe if we were aware of it, we'd be more adamant about actually protecting it, But anyway, I don't want to digress into the conservation bit too much yet. But we do have questions about transplanting. I know we have Jewel. That's a big.
Wow. Okay. All right, Jewel.
I'm going to read it on the side, and so to like block my whole face. But for collection of red mangrove propagules for restoration work here in the Bahamas, do you suggest placing them in fresh water or seawater for growing and monitoring before outplanting? I've been doing some reading, but would love to hear your take on this.
Okay, so it depends on where they're going.
Okay.
So we have inland mangroves and fresh-ish kind of water.
Okay.
Which is another interesting thing, right? So if you're collecting propagules to grow in that type of area, you wouldn't want to start growing them in salt water.
Okay.
You have to spend some time acclimating them. And if you collecting to go in salt water, yes, grow them in salt water so that they have less acclimation time.
Right. And she, of course, says sorry for the long question.
It's okay. It's fine.
That's such a great question, because I didn't even realize that you could almost kind of manipulate the seed in that way to get it accustomed to growing in something that's a bit more fresh water, or completely growing in salt water, which then brings the question, is it that can you make your own like saltwater solution, or is it best to just go straight to the ocean, collect your salt water, water your seeds with that?
I mean, we live in the Bahamas. I feel like, I'm gonna get in trouble with depth for this. But I think we should just use salt water. That's, of course, everyone get your permissions as needed, but I would recommend using the salt water.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just know it's always hard for me. I think when you got to mix the salt and the water and getting the ratio right. But I guess I would say if you live near the area, it's okay to sprinkle a bit of the seawater if you're going to put them in, on it. But we do have another question about the planting. Are they easy to transplant in different areas? Like, what is the process of, getting these seeds or these propagules, as they are called, and growing them and then transplanting them into these new areas?
Okay, so I don't know if the question is specific to reds or blacks or whites, but like most plants, you want to wait until the root is established enough so that when you move the tree or the seedling or the young plant, the root ball stays intact with a little bit of the soil. It just makes it easier to transplant, right? And lesson learned from my, failed experiments over the years, right? I was experimenting with different red mangrove nursery types. Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to ensure that the roots do not become entangled of the different plants. That would make transplanting very difficult and decrease survival rate. So you want to have one plant per pot or per bag, because you can plant in like bags. Mangroves are pretty resilient. You can plant in pretty much anything. Right? And so, yeah, there's some countries they plant in coconut shucks they'll just grow in anything.
Oh wow.
So yeah, just make sure you have independent trees to transplant. Okay, that's the first thing. And then you
want no entanglements.
Yeah. Yes. I see you. No entanglements. And then again, depending on what you've grown it in. So if you have it in soil, like these I have in soil, but if they're going to another soil area, try to keep it growing in soil. If it's going to a sandy area, start it growing in sand so that when you move it over, you don't have to acclimate as much.
Right.
So if you have to, it's fine. If you have soil, move into a sandy area. It's like other coastal plants. When you're moving them over, you just add you dig your hole and you just get a little bit of soil. You line the trench or the hole with a little bit of soil, and then you add the plant and then just cover it up. So that'll give by the time the plant grows through that soil that you've added to the bottom of your hole or your trench, it would have acclimated to the sand.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a way to do it. I just prefer soil to soil, sand to sand.
Yeah. So I know they specified it was red to grow on the coastline.
Okay. Yeah, so that applies to red and black. The white it's like a regular plant. When you're transplanting it, it's not as tricky. So I don't know if anybody if she has agriculture background.
I wonder if she's more asking because she wants to put mangroves somewhere along a coastline. But I'll see, because I know we have a bit of a delay, so I'll see if she pops more details in the comments. But we do have one more from Jewel. It's shorter. How long do you suggest for acclimation if you start them in fresh water? Is there really a difference? Like if you do fresh or change it to seawater?
You will lose some. You will lose some.
If you do them to fresh water.
If you start it in fresh water and you just plant it straight into salt water, you
Oh,
will.
no.
Yeah. But
I wonder if that's what she meant. We'll see if she clarifies. But I guess it means, does it take longer to acclimate if they're in fresh water or salt water? Like, oh, wait.
So
acclimate.
So I had some growing inside sand in my yard, and I was just watering with fresh water. And I would just pour, I'd say, a little bit of, what's a little bit? It's like a 5-gallon bucket. And I had I'd say maybe a gallon of salt water I would pour in. I would still water it in fresh water, but I poured in a gallon. And the plants weren't happy, I must say. One of the leaves started to turn yellow. It dropped off. I was very worried it was going to die. Quite a few lose some. Quite a few of the leaves dropped off, but it survived. And then I moved it. Yeah, and then I moved it over. I did that for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, and I moved it into a coastal area, and it was fine. So I would say 2 weeks. That was like 10 trees, So what I have more experience doing is growing it in salt water for salt water, growing it in a freshwater area for brackish.
And where would be, excuse me, where would be an example of a brackish area that we would put a mangrove? Like, do we have any that need restoration right now, currently in the Bahamas, or?
Not that I'm aware of. There used to be, there was a restoration project that Dr. Kathleen Sullivan Seeley did in Victoria Pond in Exuma. And I've helped with restoration projects in Nicaragua and a few other countries that have a little bit different situation.
Okay. Okay. And we have some clarification from Jewel. How long does it take to transition them if you start them in fresh water and you're trying to plant them in salt water? Which I think that's what you were saying is a no-go.
Yeah, like I said, it was about, I would say about 2 weeks, but it also depends on how big your trees are. I think just start watering them in salt water.
Yeah, so it's don't do the switch. You're more likely to lose them then.
Yeah.
All right, and we have another question, and after this one, I'll probably continue on because this just seems to be this is like this point that people are really curious about. Hi, Agnessa. Has any work been done on the mangrove sediment microbial community here in the Bahamas? Coming from William. Dr.
I read a paper. It's a very old paper that I can send Lashanti to share. It was done in San Salvador at the Genetics Research Center, and it was one study, and that's all that I could find. There are a few scientists that are working in the mangrove habitat. They may have on knowledge. So there's Dr. Craig Lehman, Dr. Craig Dahlgren, Kathleen Sullivan Seeley. They have a lot more experience than I do working in that type of work.
Interesting. I know William actually does research with soil, so I think that's why he asked that question. I see you, William. Nonetheless, so one of the things I did want to ask you is, mangroves and climate change. Like, what are some of the key things that we see mangroves do to help us against climate change? Are they being affected? Are we affecting them? Like, what is the relationship that we can see between mangroves and fighting against climate change? Or are they losing? Are we losing our mangroves? Is it too hot for them?
I don't know if it's too hot. So mangroves have been touted as, the big mitigator of climate change, right? And that's just because of where they are. They're at that interface. So sea level will rise and they can buffer some of that. So that's one instance. Another example is they fix carbon, right? And if you lose that habitat, you lose that carbon sequestration. And carbon is the big carbon is really the cause of climate change, right? So if you lose that carbon all of a sudden, you're gonna have an impact on temperature, ocean salinity, and everything else. So yes, mangroves do have an impact on climate change, especially globally. I think there was a paper done in Eleuthera that showed that the mangroves on the mangroves in a fringe line creek did actually sequester carbon. And there was another paper that just generally said MPAs in the Bahamas. And I think that's some of the work you led during your time at BNT. So some of that,
Yeah.
So MPAs do actually help sequester carbon in the Bahamas. But of course, that's specific to mangroves. That just MPAs had mangroves in it as well. So it was talking about seagrasses and mangroves combined and quarries.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of those, I don't know if a good term for it is best kept secret, but a lot of people look at, let's build more sustainably. And I know in my course I just did, sustainable development apparently is an oxymoron, but I leave that right there. But, let's build more sustainably, but they're still picking areas to build that have these wetlands and these mangroves, and then they're cutting the mangroves down and they're filling in the wetlands. It's like, it's like, do you not realize that this is exactly the opposite, what you want to do, like this whole reclaiming land thing, and even just when people want to reclaim land and cut down mangroves and say, oh, but we'll just put more mangroves somewhere else, right? It's like you're not making up for the impact that you have in this area that you've just destroyed, basically.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think the carbon storage one, or carbon sequestration, if I said it properly.
Yeah, that's
That just like rolled off the tongue so nicely. I think a lot of people don't realize that we have all of these things that we do that makes such a big impact to the greater environment in the world, right? So support MPAs, guys. And
Yep. And then, so what you're talking about is mitigation, development mitigation, which is a little bit of what I do at BRON, right? So it's always tricky if you are um, proposing to remove an old mangrove forest that has sequestered carbon for decades.
Yep.
You build there, but then you say, I'm going to plant mangroves elsewhere. But what you're going to be doing is planting a young mangrove forest that has not sequestered carbon. So there is a stopgap that we have to figure out. And I'm glad that, DEP is now officially DEP, right? This is a department, and we can work together as environmental consultants with the NGO community. We can kind of figure out how best to deal with it.
Right.
So it's interesting the next couple of years.
And so, you said that just now, obviously you don't want to try to old mangrove to new mangrove. And I just thought, can you actually transplant old mangroves? Like, has that ever been done?
I am looking into that right now. I'm going to try. I'll come back for an update. I'm trying. I'm
Season 3.
Trying. I'm definitely trying.
Definitely. And so I know one of the audience members, they clarified their point. It's a bit lengthy, but yeah, so this is the one asking about replanting the red mangroves and about putting them in front of a beachfront property on the island to break the waves from coming too far inland. Is it a good idea to do that? I think she's asking basically, if you have an area that's beachfront property and you just want to reduce the wave action and you just decide to transplant mangroves further out, is that even a good idea to do? Like if it's an area that never really had mangroves before?
Yeah, so you would have to look at the situation again, like I said, case by case.
Yeah.
Just rule of thumb, you wouldn't want to introduce a whole species or habitat in an area where it didn't exist before, because there's a reason it didn't exist there before. What is that reason, right? But I mean, if you wanted to, there is a way. My colleague, actually, Kelly Ashley Armstrong, she has been doing a lot of research. She actually did a couple courses on how to change an ecosystem but create the same ecosystem service. It's like, and I'm sorry, Kelly, if you're watching and I mess this up, but it's if you have a seagrass area that's in a creek, right, and you want to change it to a mangrove area, how do you still keep the same ecosystem service value? There you go. There she is. Wetland design. Way to go, Kelly. Way to come
through. Yeah, definitely. I think.
Yeah. So to help the viewer, it's possible, but you also want to consider what else comes with the mangroves, right? Yeah. So the mangroves, they will help to slow down the energy, but the leaves are going to attract birds, right? And crabs. Do you want all of that wildlife? I'm not saying you don't. I just want you to think about all options, right? So it is possible. Just do a little bit more research and try to figure out if you want everything else that comes with the mangroves.
Right, definitely. Because if you let them stay there long enough, that'll become a whole nursery area for sharks. Like you got the little baby sharks come in, you get the big sharks off
there. The turtles, yep.
And the turtles, yes. So that is true. And I think that sounds like a very interesting topic, what you were just talking about with Kelly Ashley, the whole wetland design thing. Can you actually have that trade-off, And I did a bit of work with this whole like offsetting and ecosystem services and maintaining the value of the area. And it's such an interesting topic. And I know one of the things that I found really interesting is human intervention. Like we always just think, and then I don't want to teeter into a topic that might be very controversial. I just think sometimes it's like, we just always want to kind of intervene when it's like, just look at how the area is naturally and we must work around that, as opposed to let's just break it down and build it back up into something different, So oftentimes it's not the answer. But again, I don't know. I might be teetering into a topic that neither of us should really be teetering into. I don't want
No, no.
I don't want
But I understand what you're saying. I get it.
And I know Kelly actually, what did she say? It's a course offered by the Swamp School. Similar courses are offered by other accredited education institutions and the Society of Wetland Scientists. So I'll definitely look into that. Principles of wetland design. We will segue on into talking about sustainable livelihoods. That's also something that I think is a hot button issue right now in the Bahamas. Like, how can the natural environment provide sustainable livelihoods, and how can mangroves do that? And I know one of the things that we always used to hit home with whenever we did have public meetings is the fact that mangroves provide nursery areas for fishermen, and whether you fish them or whether you snorkel to see them. But how do you have any maybe thoughts on that? Like, how can mangroves bring opportunities for sustainable livelihoods?
Yeah, definitely. You're right. Mangroves provide nursery, habitat, breeding grounds for a lot of marine species that people like to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Marine species people like to eat. Yes. Sorry. Sorry again. What was I? Sustainable livelihoods. So, yeah, in some countries, the mangroves are used in beekeeping, and that is sustainable livelihood. You put your hive in a mangrove area, and they feed on the flowers and the other organisms that live in the mangrove, not other organisms as in like animals, but the other flowers that tend to grow in the mangrove habitat. A lot of, sorry, I'm getting distracted, but yes, I'm gonna say yes.
You just took off the petals off the flower.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's actually interesting. I've never heard of beekeeping in the mangrove. I know a lot of people are getting into beekeeping at home, so that's probably actually something really interesting for someone to look into if they live near a mangrove area. I wonder what that honey would taste like.
Right, I don't know.
Interesting.
I think it's also like the Philippines, maybe. I don't know that anybody has tried it here yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard about it, but if I find out anything, I'll shoot you the information.
Yeah, definitely. And so, any beekeepers watching, look into beekeeping in the mangroves. I know, salted honey.
You know what? Why not?
Because we have salted caramel. I think salty honey might actually taste really good. I'm gonna go try that. I think I have some honey in my cupboard. But yeah, so I know that the Prime Minister's talking tonight, so I don't want to stretch this too long. We have about maybe 18 minutes left. But I do want to ask, so from your perspective, you being a female in STEM, how can someone, and sorry, gentlemen watching, I always love when I have a woman because I think it's underrepresented, and I know one of our listeners may debate with me the fact that for the Bahamas, is very heavily populated in the conservation sector by women. I still think it's important for the representation because the grand scheme of things is always a bit harder for us to get into certain types of fields. Nonetheless, how can you suggest for somebody maybe watching, whether they be a young Bahamian or just a young person interested in doing some of this work, because it sounds like such interesting stuff. How can someone get into mangrove conservation and restoration?
Okay. So I would say the first thing is really do your research to find out which NGOs or conservation organizations are nearby, right? Reach out to them to see if they have any programs that are ongoing that you can volunteer for and with. And then definitely please be open to volunteerism and internships.
Yeah.
Even if the internship is unpaid, I know, these are COVID times and sometimes people just can't take an unpaid internship, but what you learn from there and the networking skills and the people that you connect with is just often priceless, right? So definitely be open to volunteering. Okay. Oh, hey, Eric.
Hey.
So you could definitely reach out to me, my organization. We have intern programs that we're always looking to fill.
Perfect.
I know Bonefish Tarpon and Trust, they are spearheading a massive, along with the BNT, a massive red mangrove flat habitat restoration project in Grand Bahama and Abaco.
Nice.
So I'm sure they're going to be looking for donations of plants once we follow the correct methodology. Yeah. So please follow the correct methodology, people. Please, please, please. Thank you.
Definitely.
And the other thing is always research yourself. Always, Google Scholar or JSTOR. Always do your own reading. Come to the table when you're volunteering, when you are participating in an internship. Come to the table armed. You will be respected greatly by the people you are working with. They will be more inclined to discuss things with you, more inclined to help you out.
Right.
Just approach the internship as though there's just something I need to do. Check this box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think even for me, my way into getting into the conservation sector at home, I did an internship. I interned many moons ago at Dolphin Encounters. And then when I actually got a full-time job, I volunteered with BNT for like maybe 3 days. And a couple months later, I was working, there. But it's so important, and it sucks, right? Because I think it's hard for non-governmental organizations to provide paid internships, but that information and that experience you gain is so important. And to anyone listening, definitely intern as much as you can and just get that experience because that's so invaluable. For someone going off to school, a lot of the information that contributed came from that real world experience. And listening as well, don't feel the pressure to, go off to school. A lot of people have the opportunity to. There are still a lot of things that you can do to make an impact in mangrove conservation, in mangrove restoration. Like Agnessa said, soon enough, like maybe if you heard this and you've seen propagules floating around, try the methodology, see if you can start doing your own, and you can donate that. You can make an impact. And if you are doing that, to just give a shout out to the Sustainable Lifestyle Group, that's a tree that you can consider as a tree planted, and you can log that in for the 100K tree planting initiative. So there's so many things I think that people can do to contribute without even having to go to school. And I think that's also a message that I try to drive home is you have to go and get a PhD to make a difference in the conservation sector. And apparently, because our mangroves so cool and unique, I think there's so much data collection that can be done. I mean, as simple as just picking leaves. Like that's all. But knowing which leaf to pick, there's a trick to it.
Yes. A way to stick it in the silica. You guys did a really good job.
Thank you. And you got to label it properly. But no, and I think that's something I think you and I have talked about before. This whole citizen science thing, like people can get involved, and there's so many ways for Bahamians or for anybody to get involved with scientific research and make a difference and help us gather the information because. Like you said earlier, the mangroves in the Bahamas apparently are super unique. I'm very interested in reading up on that. I think Bahamians are super unique amongst the world. Sorry to everyone else listening. And so just to hear that our mangroves are super special too, that just makes me feel extra Bahamian. Like I'm so proud of our mangroves for being different and setting the standard.
Love it. Love it.
Love it. Yeah, exactly. So I definitely, if you can send me stuff. Yeah, and there's Melissa, right? If you can send me information, I'd be happy to post it about, mangrove methodology, mangrove planting, how to tell which mangrove it is, maybe by looking at the seed. I think a lot of people see the red mangrove propagule floating around because I know I did before. I knew. I just was like, where's this broken branch from? Like all these broken branches, because it looks so, it's just like a broken branch, but we do have a couple of suggestions. I know Kelly is recommending the program at UB, the Small Island Sustainability Program, which I just learned about that after the fact, and I'm actually really happy to hear that University of the Bahamas has that program going on. Did you know about that program as well?
Yeah, it started after I left. So I got my associates from College of the Bahamas. I changed. That started after a couple of years after. One of my colleagues, Gabrielle Neely, she is a graduate of that program.
Okay. Awesome. And we have a comment from Eric. Sorry, joined a bit late. Are there opportunities for private sector entities to collaborate on some of these important restoration projects on the horizon? Are companies open to providing expert support and collaborators? Like, can I lean on folks like you and Mark D for support? And if anybody who's been watching my show, Mark Daniels has made an appearance more than once. I'm trying to get him again for this season. So if you're watching, Mark, then we need to set the date. But yeah. So yeah.
That's definitely room for collaboration. So, like I mentioned earlier, I know you joined a little late. So BRON is actually working on the IW Eco project with DEP. So we will be working with BNT, Forestry, and other groups on Grand Bahama. So there's definitely opportunity.
Awesome. And this is actually an interesting question. Is mangrove tea a thing? We just make tea out of everything.
In some countries, yes. In some countries, yes. So the red is really rich tannins, because that's where tea come from. Tea, it's the tannins that leaches out into the water, and that's what we drink. So in some countries, yes. We have not done that. I am not aware of anybody doing that in the Bahamas. Now, I don't know. I know down south, there's a lot more bush tea happening, like Auckland's area. I don't know if they've tried it down there. I personally haven't tried it.
You said which mangrove you say the other countries is used?
They use red, but there are different species of red mangroves, right? So we only have one of each. We have one red, one black, one white. Other countries have multiple reds, multiple blacks.
Right. We also have Fred. She is also a mangrove queen. Oh, you know Fred!
I know Fred!
Okay, good. Because she has her own NGO, Roots of the Sea. I hope I got that right. Fred, please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, we definitely do need more collaboration across the islands. I think that's something the Bahamas can get a lot better at, is collaborating with the other countries. And I think just our proximity, that's I think is the biggest issue. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. On why, how can we increase collaboration? We need to go down more. I need to just.
Yeah. No, I think like the program you were in. All right. I think if Bahamians take a little bit more initiative to join programs like that one. I was also in a program, Conservation Leadership in the Caribbean. And it was really a program where it connected people from all over the Caribbean and Latin America on the Caribbean coast, right? And so we really realized, I must say, it was that program that helped me realize we actually have a lot of the same issues, even though we're so far apart. It's a big, information sharing, lessons learned effort. So I think we're gonna get there. I think we're moving in the right direction. Just going to different conferences where people are from different parts of the region. I think we're moving in the right direction, honestly.
I think so. And I think especially like the fact that you and I both know Fred, that's already a standard. Like we are clearly networking properly, So hopefully, I definitely would like to see us as Bahamians collaborate with the Caribbean. I think, and that's probably a historical thing, how we've been so far removed, but we're getting back there, We just started Carnival again. That's a sign, right? But not again. We just started it.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So I know this Prime Minister is going to do a talk soon. I don't want to dwindle too long. And thanks. We got Fred. Yes, definitely. We will.
Yes.
Live Q&A. If there are any last minute questions, you can send that now. But in the meantime, Agnessa, do you have any final thoughts for people listening that you would maybe want to, if you had to do an elevator pitch for Mangroves or something? I know, right?
Mangroves. What is my elevator pitch? Mangroves are more than a red mangrove. You have red, black, and white. And it is when you have the three working together in an ecosystem, you see the most benefits. So yes, we should work on mangrove ecosystems versus just red mangrove.
Yeah, that is a good point. I think when people think about mangroves, they do just think of the red and negate the fact that it's, like you said, that ecosystem. And even if we want to take it even bigger, just the marine environment, mangroves, seagrass, and coral reef. And I think coral reefs, they're great. They get all the attention. And I think people forget that, it's a team effort here.
Yeah, it really is a team effort. That's a good one. It's a team effort. Yeah.
So we have to work together, and we have to work with them together to get things done. I don't see any other questions. I don't know. I think this was a great episode. Thanks so much, Agnessa. I really appreciate you taking the time out on your wonderful Sunday afternoon. You could have been doing anything else. You could have been eating some good Sunday dinner, but you chose to be here on this episode with me. I appreciate it. And I definitely, to everyone watching, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Siren Sundays. We'll be doing an episode every Sunday this month because it is my birthday month. Stay tuned. I know. Stay tuned for a potential giveaway. And yeah, let's just always remember that as a country, as different countries, the ocean is not what separates us. It's definitely what connects us. So let's stay connected to each other and to the environment, and have a great Sunday.
Thanks, everybody.